years in, not many years in at that
like
point.
8 years in, yeah.
So it was very new. So like when people would talk about 5-star and all that stuff, like we never really understood down the line how big being a 5-star was and the opportunities that you would have if you were ended up being that good. Like we didn't know. Like I don't know if you knew. I don't know if you thought back then. I mean, I don't know if you could take me through the thought process, but now you're seeing back, like you could really get real stats from it. Real statistics of 5-star, 4-star, 3-star. There is no 2-star anymore, but even the 2-stars from back in the day, like how far guys went, how they didn't go, that kind of a thing.
It started around 2010, 2011 or so when I started to see the correlation between the star rankings and the NFL draft. So we started doing, sort of a breakdown after each draft of how many kids in the first round were 5, 4, 3, 2 or unranked. And I started noticing it's the 4 and 5 stars, I think, is the number. Like 63% of the first rounders are, 4 or 5 stars. And it depends on the draft. But when you think of kids, you think of, players that you watched this past weekend. I could rattle off their star ranking pretty easily as to whether they're, elite players or not. Joe Burrow's playing tonight. He was a 3. He ended up being the number 1 overall pick. Josh Allen's playing tonight. He was a 2-star. Went to Wyoming. But then you think about the rosters. Jamar Chase. He was a high 4-star. Stephon Diggs was a 5-star. Joe Mixon was a 5-star. And you start digging into the rosters and you start seeing some of the teams building around these players. So the correlation, but I really started to notice the correlation between 5 stars and the draft when people started projecting drafts years in advance. It used to be, okay, here's a mock 2023 draft. And no sites had 2024, no sites had 2025. You see out there mock 2025 drafts now where kids are freshmen. You'll see a mock 2026 draft based on the 2023 class. I mean, there's a mock 2026 draft out there where Arch Manning's the number 1 pick in the draft, because of his ranking.
Right.
And what happens is when those draft lists occur so early, then they exist for so long that when you start getting closer to the 2026 draft, you start looking at those. And so a kid like an Arch Manning will be on there, and he's not a great example because he's such a big name, but a kid like or Kamani McLean, who still hasn't decided on the school, but he's the number 1 cornerback in this class. He's on some idiot's 2026 mock draft, to the Raiders, the 8th pick. Now, we have no idea what pick the Raiders are going to have in 2026. We have no idea if this kid's going to be any good. He hasn't played a down of college football, but he's there. And then each draft you'll see. And I started seeing kids that really sucked in college, that weren't very good, that were 5 stars, that kept populating these drafts. And maybe not sucked, but Deshaun Hand's a great example. He was our number 1. Myles Garrett was our number 2 in the 2014 class. And I kept seeing he went to Alabama. He was a sort of a depth player. He moved to defensive tackle, and he was always in the rotation, but he never started. He was behind like Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, some first-round guys. But I kept seeing Deshaun Hand, top 20 pick in the NFL draft. And every year, he never really got better. And he ended up, I think, in the 4th round to the Lions, and I think he's out of the league now. Every year, I kept seeing him in the top 20, and I'm like, this makes no sense. And it was based on his high school ranking, and that was it. So that's when I started noticing that these people who do these mock drafts, that the non-professionals, they just throw star rankings into these drafts, and the kids get momentum that way. So then all 32 of those NFL teams see this.
Yes.
And then they have to do extra research on the kids. Like, what are we missing about Hand? Let's go back to his high school years. He was a defensive end. He moved to defensive tackle. Playing for Alabama, he's really good. He's won a national championship. Maybe he's a guy. And he was probably drafted. Byron Cowart's another example. He was our number 1 player 1 year. He went to Auburn. He was horrible. Went to Maryland, had 1 good year. He ended up being drafted, I think, 3rd round. And it was all because of the high school stuff and the fact that he was on those lists so much that somebody said, well, there's something here. I'm not seeing it on film, but there's something here I'm missing. I'm going to take them. And that's why they owe me money, because they should have really probably not been taken. So that's when I started seeing around 2010, 2011, but really into that 2014 class, it started getting crazy.
Well, one of the interesting things, haven't been on the agent side of it with the NFL draft with rounds 5, 6, and 7. They will take chances on the flyer FCS guy that ran a 4.40 and the not panned out 5-star, right? The guy who did. So you see those, like if you were a 5-star and you can make it all the way through and manage to play somewhat, you're probably going to have you're definitely getting into a camp. Definitely. There's no doubt. Like, unless you're like a criminal, beating women or, any of those things, like, and you didn't play, you're going to get into a camp, and you're probably going to have a chance to even get back late drafted. I used to see those guys go all the time. It was the same reason we used to be like, if we would filter the tight end list by 6'5" or bigger, right? The guys that were in it. We didn't care if they played at Division II. If they were 6'5" or bigger, we knew they were going to get in a camp. We knew they may not get drafted, if they went to FCS or Division I, but we knew we could get those guys in the camp. And invariably, when it got to like 6th or 7th round, they would be calling me up. They'd be like, "Hey, Dave, where's so and so going? He hasn't been drafted. He hasn't been drafted. Okay, well, we're going to offer him a free agent deal. Let us know if and you get a few offers from him. He would get like a signing bonus, like a decent signing bonus, because he was literally 6'7". 6'6", 6'8", and they always say what's the worst thing that happens with a tight end that is just become a blocking guy? They try him at left tackle. You're going to be in the league for 3 years bouncing around. There's no doubt. Like, if you're 6'7" and you're 250 pounds, and for some reason you're not a good enough tight end, they're going to be like, you know what, bulk him up. The agent's going to say, hey, bulk him up, see if he can work at left tackle. And worse than happens, he's your practice squad guy for 3 years. And then he goes off, But I've seen these things like
the hype
happen.
It's the hype. I was looking at real quick Tony Grimes' class. He's the number 24 player in that class for us. And there's guys in this class. Will Anderson was number 22 in that class, and obviously he's going to be top 3 pick and such. Jackson Smith and Jigba. Bijan Robinson. I mean, some really, really good football players in here. But a guy like Julian Fleming's a good example. So he's their number 3 receiver at Ohio State. He never really panned out. He was ESPN, I think, had him as the number 1 player in the country that year over Bryce Young and DJ Uiagalelei, or maybe top 5. He's 6'3", he's 210 pounds. He's going to get a chance, and he's done really nothing at Ohio State. But he'll get an extra look over a kid maybe at the Group of 5 level or FCS level who put up crazy numbers and was a starter for 4 years. He'll just get an extra chance. Elias Ricks at Alabama was the number 1 corner in that class, ahead of Kaylee Ringo. He's going to get a lot of chances. Eric Gilbert, who was at LSU and then transferred and has had some off-field issues and mental health issues, and he was at Georgia. Now he's back in the portal again. He's going to get another chance because he's a 5-star and so talented. So they just get a little bit of a leg up. And sometimes that's all you need. But I think there's too much emphasis put on the star rankings when you're talking about the NFL because, again, no offense to some of these kids that I'm looking at in this class, they didn't pan out. They didn't have the careers that you expected, and they're going to be overdrafted because of it and drafted higher than they should be. And maybe it'll work out. I don't know. Sometimes it does. Sometimes
it can work out.
I mean, look at Diggs. Diggs is a good example. He didn't have a bad college career, but he broke his leg. He had 5 different quarterbacks in 1 season at Maryland. He had the worst coach on earth in Randy Edsall. He dropped to the 5th round. We all knew he was enough talented kid. Like, he was almost my number 1 player in that class. That was the Dorial Green Beckham class. He was number 8. Circumstance led to a bad career at Maryland. I should have stayed home, but he did it for his mom. And now he's one of the top 3 wide receivers in the NFL. So, sometimes you can have a bad situation in college and not live up to the hype and succeed. But sometimes you can go off to college, not live up to the hype, get overdrafted too high, and then be out of the NFL in 2 years. So I think the star rankings are too much, but that's what's happened. They put together these dumb mock draft the top 2026 draft lists way ahead of time. And then they don't budge off of them. You know, if a kid stinks, he has 2 bad years or average years, they'll keep him there because of that star ranking. And I don't know, it just leads to mistakes. NFL teams fall for this stuff, and it surprises me because they're not supposed to be looking at high school rankings. Bucky Brooks, who's the NFL.com draft analyst, he does a high school ranking. He started doing it like 10 years ago, and I think he falls for it. I think if you're really tempered to look at these kids as high school kids and not able to disseminate how they actually played in college, you're going to fall into this. And I try to make sure every time I do an NFL draft analysis, I do not base it on what they were coming out. They're different human beings now, but a lot of people don't do that.
Right. And it's very, very interesting stuff. I mean, like wildly interesting. I want to talk about one thing, and it's a big thing before we get off, because today's been an amazing discussion.